You shake hands with your business partner. You've worked the same claim together for 3 months. You've shared food, stories, hardships. You think you know him. The next morning, you wake up with a gun to your head. He takes everything, your gold, your supplies, your boots, and leaves you to die in the wilderness. You trusted him. That was your fatal mistake. Welcome to early California, where trust wasn't just rare, it was impossible. Where trusting another human being could get you robbed, beaten, or killed. Where the most dangerous thing you could do was believe someone's word. Between 1848 and 1880, California was a society built entirely on suspicion, paranoia, and betrayal. It wasn't that people chose not to trust each other. It's that the environment made trust a luxury no one could afford. You couldn't trust your partner. You couldn't trust the law. You couldn't trust merchants, bankers, doctors, or judges. You couldn't trust what people said their names were or where they came from. You couldn't even trust your own neighbors because tomorrow they might be your competitors or your killers. This wasn't paranoia. This was survival. Trust requires certain conditions: stable society, functioning law, consequences for betrayal, repeated interactions, shared values, community accountability. Early California had none of these. Instead, it had the perfect conditions for creating a society where trust was impossible and betrayal was rational. This is the story of how an entire society functioned without the most basic social glue that holds human communities together. How tens of thousands of people lived in proximity without ever truly trusting each other. And why that absence of trust made early California one of the most brutal, violent, and psychologically devastating places in American history. Let me show you exactly why trust didn't exist and what happened because of it. January 1848. Gold is discovered, word spreads, and within 18 months over 80,000 people from across the globe flood into California. These people are strangers, complete strangers. They come from different countries, different cultures, different languages. An American farmer from Ohio is camped next to a Chilean miner, a French merchant, a Chinese laborer, an Australian convict, a Mexican rancher who was already there. Nobody knows anybody. There are no shared histories, no mutual friends, no family connections, no community ties, nothing that binds these people together except the desire for gold. And that desire makes them competitors, not allies. Back home, wherever home was, you lived in a community. People knew you, knew your family, knew your reputation. If you cheated someone, everyone would know. You'd face social consequences. You'd be ostracized. Your family would suffer shame. The community would hold you accountable. That social pressure, that web of accountability, is what makes trust possible. You can trust people because breaking that trust has real consequences. In early California, none of that exists. You're anonymous. You can tell people any name you want, any background, any story. There's no way to verify it. You could be a preacher or a murderer back home and no one would know the difference. And if you betray someone, there are no social consequences because there's no society. You can rob your partner, move to the next mining camp 20 miles away, use a different name, and start fresh. No one will ever connect you to your crimes. This anonymity destroys the foundation of trust, but it gets worse. California isn't even a state yet. It won't become one until 1850. For the first 2 years of the gold rush, there's barely any government at all. No established law. No functioning courts, no reliable police. The population explodes from under 15,000 in 1848 to over 250,000 by 1852. But there's no infrastructure to support them. No institutions, no systems, it's pure chaos. Temporary mining camps appear and disappear. San Francisco transforms from a quiet settlement to a lawless boom town virtually overnight. Everything is unstable, transient, precarious. In this environment, there's no mechanism to enforce contracts or punish betrayal. If someone wrongs you, you can't appeal to the law because the law barely exists. You can't rely on courts because courts are backlogged, corrupt, or non-existent. You're on your own, and everyone else is on their own too. And here's the critical factor: everyone is desperate. People spent everything they had to get here. They traveled for months. They endured incredible hardships. They arrived with nothing but hope, hope that's dying fast as they realize the easy gold is already gone. Desperate people make desperate choices. And in an environment with no accountability, desperate people become dangerous people. You look at every person you meet and you have to ask yourself, would they rob me if they thought they could get away with it? Would they kill me for my gold? Would they betray me if it served their interests? And the honest answer is probably yes, because that's the rational choice in this environment. Trust is a liability, suspicion is survival. This is the world that makes trust impossible, and this is just the beginning. Let's talk about what your daily life looks like in a world without trust. You wake up in your tent if you even sleep. You probably don't sleep deeply because sleeping means being vulnerable. You sleep with one eye open, with a weapon within reach, listening for sounds of someone approaching. Because your tent contains everything you own. Your gold dust, your supplies, your tools. And any one of the hundreds of men camped around you would happily kill you for it if they thought they could get away with it. So you don't sleep well. You're always on edge, always alert. When you do wake up, you check your possessions immediately. Is everything still here? Did anyone steal from you during the night? You develop obsessive routines, counting your gold dust, checking your supplies, looking for signs of tampering. You can't share a tent with anyone. Sharing means vulnerability. It means someone else knows what you have and where you keep it. It means sleeping in proximity to someone who could kill you in your sleep. So you're alone, always alone, even when you're surrounded by people. Now you need water, but you can't trust the water sources. Mining operations upstream have polluted the rivers with mercury and other toxic chemicals, but they won't tell you that. They have no incentive to warn you. Your health isn't their concern, so you drink and hope you don't get sick. Or you try to find clean water, but you can't trust what other people tell you about where the clean water is. They might be lying. They might want you to go somewhere dangerous. They might want you to leave so they can take over your claim. Every piece of information is suspect. Now you need food. You go to a merchant, but can you trust what he's selling you? No, absolutely not. Merchants routinely sell spoiled food, watered-down whiskey, contaminated flour, defective tools. They use false weights to cheat you. They lie about what's in the packages. They charge outrageous prices because they know you're desperate. And there's no consumer protection, no regulation, no accountability. If you buy poisoned food and get sick, that's your problem, so you inspect everything carefully. You weigh things yourself if you can. You trust nothing. But this takes time, energy, mental bandwidth. You're exhausted from the constant vigilance required just to not get cheated in basic transactions. Now you need to work your claim, but you can't leave it unattended because if you do, someone will jump it. They'll move your boundary markers. They'll work your claim while you're gone. They'll steal the gold you've already extracted and hidden. So you work alone, always. You can't take a day off. You can't get sick. You can't leave to get supplies without risking everything. This isolation is psychologically devastating. Humans are social creatures. We need connection, cooperation, community. But you can't have any of that because trust doesn't exist. You want to partner with someone. Partnerships make sense. You could work more efficiently. Watch each other's backs. Take turns getting supplies, but you can't trust a partner. Everyone has heard the stories. Partners who killed each other over gold. Partners who waited until their companion was vulnerable and then murdered them and took everything. Partners who simply disappeared in the night with all the gold. These stories aren't rare. They're common, normal, expected. So you stay alone. You do everything yourself. You exhaust yourself because you have no choice. And the loneliness compounds. You're surrounded by people but utterly isolated. You can't form genuine connections because any connection is a potential vulnerability. You develop a hard shell. You trust no one. You share nothing. You reveal nothing about yourself. Not your real name, not where you're from, not what you found, not what you're thinking or feeling. You become a closed system. Self-sufficient, suspicious, paranoid, and this isn't irrational paranoia. This is rational assessment of risk. Because the moment you trust someone, the moment you let your guard down, you're vulnerable. And in early California, vulnerability gets you killed. So you don't trust. You can't trust. Trust is a luxury you cannot afford. And this pattern repeats every single day, every interaction, every transaction, every conversation. You live in a state of permanent suspicion, permanent vigilance, permanent isolation. And this is what passes for normal life in early California. A life without trust is a life without rest. Without real connection, without peace, it's survival but barely. Now let's talk about why trust is impossible in economic relationships and why that makes everything worse. You need work. Let's say you can't work your own claim anymore. Maybe you never had one, maybe you lost it, maybe you need cash for supplies, so you hire yourself out to a mine owner or a larger operation. Can you trust that you'll be paid? Absolutely not. Mine owners routinely cheat workers. They promise wages and then don't pay them. They claim the gold you extracted wasn't as much as you said. They dock your pay for imaginary infractions. They pay you in credit at their company store where prices are inflated instead of real money. And what can you do about it? There's no labor law, no enforcement, no recourse. You could confront them, but they have hired muscle. Armed guards who will beat you or kill you if you cause trouble. You're alone and powerless, so you take what you're given. And you trust no employer because no employer is trustworthy. Or maybe you try to form a partnership, pool resources, work a claim together, split the profits. This requires trust. And trust requires honesty about what you're finding. But here's the problem. If you find gold, your partner can't verify how much. You could pocket some without him knowing. And he knows that. Just like you know he could be doing the same thing. So you're both watching each other constantly, suspecting each other, trying to monitor each other's every move. The partnership is poisoned by mutual suspicion before it even begins. And most partnerships end in betrayal. One partner kills the other, or robs him, or simply disappears with more than his share. The rational response is to never partner in the first place. Now let's talk about banking. You've managed to accumulate some gold. You need to store it somewhere safe. Can you trust a bank? No. Banks fail constantly in early California. They close overnight. They're robbed. The bankers themselves embezzle deposits and flee. There's no FDIC insurance. No regulation. No protection. If the bank fails, your savings are gone, just gone, so you hide your gold yourself. You bury it. You carry it on your person. You sleep on top of it. But that makes you a target. If people know you have gold, you're in danger, so you can't tell anyone. You can't trust anyone with that information, and merchants know this. They know you probably have gold hidden somewhere, so some merchants are also robbers. They sell you supplies during the day and follow you back to your camp at night to rob you. Can you trust merchants? No. Can you trust other miners who offer to sell you equipment or claims? No. The equipment is probably defective. The claims are probably worthless. They're called salting, putting a little gold in a worthless claim to make it seem valuable, then selling it to a desperate fool. Everyone is trying to cheat everyone, because cheating is profitable and there are no consequences. And this creates a vicious cycle. Because you can't trust others, you cheat when you can. Because everyone assumes you're cheating, they cheat you first. The lack of trust becomes self-fulfilling. It's a race to the bottom. A society-wide prisoner's dilemma where everyone defects because cooperation is too risky. And if you're not white, it's exponentially worse. If you're Chinese, you're paid half as much for the same work if you're paid at all. You're cheated more blatantly. Your claims are jumped more frequently. You have even less recourse because you can't testify in court against white people. If you're Mexican or Native American, you face the same discrimination plus outright violence. The lack of trust isn't equally distributed. The powerful exploit the powerless because there's no accountability. And this economic system without trust, it's incredibly inefficient. Prevents cooperation. It prevents economies of scale. It prevents specialization in trade. Everyone has to do everything themselves because they can't trust others to do it. Everyone hoards because they can't trust banking systems. Everyone operates in isolation because partnerships are too dangerous. This makes everyone poorer, less productive, more vulnerable. But the alternative, trusting people in this environment, is worse. It's financial suicide. So you don't trust. You operate alone. You protect what's yours. You assume everyone else is trying to cheat you because they probably are, and you become part of the system that makes trust impossible. Because in early California, economic survival requires betraying others before they betray you. That's not morality. That's just math. Now let's talk about what happens when you get sick or injured in a place where you can't trust anyone to help you. You wake up with a fever, cholera maybe, or typhoid. You're vomiting, weak. You need help, but you can't trust anyone to help you. If you're sick, you're vulnerable. You can't defend your possessions. You can't defend yourself. And everyone around you knows it. So you hide your illness as long as possible. You keep working even though you're dying because stopping means admitting weakness. And weakness invites predation. When you finally can't hide it anymore, when you're too sick to stand, you're alone in your tent. No one comes to help you. No one brings you water or food. Why would they? They don't know you. You're not family. You're not a friend because friendship requires trust and trust doesn't exist. You're just another sick miner. If you die, someone will take your claim and your possessions, that's all. So you lie there alone, delirious, terrified, hoping you survive. If you do survive, it's despite the lack of help, not because of it. And if you need medical care, can you trust doctors? Absolutely not. Many doctors in early California are frauds. They have no training. They're opportunists who figured they could make money off desperate sick people. They sell you fake medicines, perform unnecessary procedures, charge you exorbitant fees for treatments that don't work or make you worse. And even legitimate doctors can't be fully trusted. They're operating in an unregulated environment. They might be drunk. They might be experimenting on you. They might demand payment up front and then provide minimal care once they have your money. You have no way to verify credentials, no way to hold them accountable for malpractice, no recourse if they harm you. So you're taking a massive risk every time you seek medical care. You might be paying to be made worse. Many people avoid doctors entirely and just hope they heal on their own. Now let's say you're injured. You break your leg in a mining accident. You need help getting back to camp. You need someone to set the bone. Can you trust the men who help you? Maybe. But maybe they're helping you back to camp so they can see where your gold is hidden. Maybe they'll come back tonight and rob you while you're immobilized. This isn't paranoia. This happens. So even when you desperately need help, you're calculating risk. Can I trust these people? What information am I revealing by accepting help? What am I making myself vulnerable to? And often the answer is, I can't risk it. I'd rather crawl back to camp alone than trust strangers. This means people die who could have been saved. They die alone. They die refusing help because help is too dangerous. And when people die, which happens constantly, no one mourns them. No one knows their real names. No one knows where they're from or if they have families waiting for them. They're just buried in unmarked graves, or their bodies are left where they fell. Because why would anyone take responsibility for burying a stranger? There's no community obligation, no social expectation, no trust-based social contract that says we care for each other. You're on your own in life, and you're on your own in death. This absence of trust means there's no mutual aid, no looking out for each other, no community care for the sick or injured. Everyone is isolated. Everyone is vulnerable. Everyone is alone. And this makes disease and injury far more deadly than they need to be. People die not just from the illness or injury itself, but from the lack of care that results from the absence of trust. In a functioning community built on trust, people help each other. They care for the sick. They support the injured. In early California, they step over your body on their way to stake your claim. That's what a society without trust looks like. Now let's talk about crime and violence, and why the absence of trust makes everything infinitely more dangerous. In early California, you assume everyone is a potential threat, and you're right to assume that. Crime is epidemic because there's no functioning law enforcement. Murders happen daily. Robberies are constant. Theft is so common it's barely remarked upon. And the lack of trust makes it impossible to identify criminals or hold them accountable. Someone robs you. Can you trust witnesses to tell the truth about what they saw? No. They might lie to protect the robber if he's their friend or business partner. They might lie because they're afraid of retaliation. They might lie because they simply don't want to get involved. Or they might tell the truth, but you have no way to verify it. You can't trust their testimony because you don't know them. You don't know their motives. You don't know if they're lying or mistaken or telling the truth. So even when crimes happen in public, there's no reliable way to establish facts. And even if you identify the criminal, what then? You can't trust the sheriff. Sheriffs are often corrupt. They take bribes. They protect their friends. They ignore crimes committed by powerful people while punishing the powerless. You can't trust the courts. Judges are appointed by whoever has power at the moment. Trials are shams. Justice is for sale. So the legal system can't be trusted to provide justice. What's your alternative? Vigilante justice. And vigilante justice is everywhere in early California. But can you trust a vigilante mob? Absolutely not. Vigilante committees claim they're restoring order, punishing criminals, making communities safe, but they're just mobs. They execute people based on accusations, rumors, or personal vendettas. There's no due process, no real investigation, no presumption of innocence. They hang people who might be guilty or might be innocent. Nobody knows for sure. And vigilante committees are often tools of whoever has power. They're used to eliminate business rivals, to terrorize minorities, to enforce the interests of the powerful against the powerless. You can't trust them to be just or fair. So crime exists without reliable justice, which means everyone lives in fear. You walk around armed constantly because you can't trust anyone. You sleep with weapons because you can't trust that you'll be safe. You avoid confrontation because you can't trust that the law will protect you if things escalate. And this hypervigilance is exhausting, but the alternative is worse. The alternative is being victimized, robbed, killed, and having no recourse. Now let's talk about what this does to social interactions. Every interaction is potentially dangerous. A simple disagreement can escalate to violence because there's no trusted authority to mediate, no social mechanism to de-escalate. Someone insults you. Back home, you'd let it go or you'd rely on social pressure to resolve it. Here, if you don't respond with violence, you're seen as weak. And weakness makes you a target, so you have to respond. You have to be willing to fight, to kill, over trivial provocations, not because you're violent by nature, but because the absence of trust and law means violence is the only currency of respect. This creates a culture of hair-trigger violence. Everyone is armed. Everyone is ready to kill. Everyone knows that any interaction could turn deadly. And this makes genuine human connection impossible. You can't be vulnerable with people who might kill you. You can't have honest conversations with people you don't trust. You can't build relationships when every relationship might be a threat. So you remain isolated, guarded, suspicious of everyone, and the violence continues. The crime continues. The lawlessness continues. Because without trust, there's no way to create legitimate authority, no way to establish real justice, no way to build a society where people feel safe enough to put down their weapons. Trust is the foundation of law and order. And in early California, that foundation doesn't exist. So you live in chaos, in fear, in permanent danger, and you trust no one, because trusting anyone could get you killed. If trust is impossible for white American men in early California, it's exponentially worse for women, children, and immigrants. Let's start with women. If you're a woman in early California, you can't trust anyone, and you have far more to lose than men do. You're vastly outnumbered, surrounded by desperate, isolated men, many of whom see you not as a person but as a commodity, as property, as something to be used. You can't trust men to respect you, to protect you, to treat you as human. You face constant harassment, propositions, threats. You're grabbed, groped, propositioned constantly. And if you report it, you're not believed, you're blamed. Can you trust the law to protect you? No, crimes against women are barely investigated. Rapists walk free. Abusers face no consequences. Can you trust other women to support you? Maybe. But there are so few women that community is difficult to build, and competition for safety and resources sometimes pits women against each other. If you're forced into prostitution, and thousands of women are, especially trafficked Chinese women, you can't trust anyone at all. You can't trust the men who use you. They're violent, entitled, dangerous. You can't trust the pimps and madams who control you. They see you as profit. They'll work you to death if it makes them money. You can't trust the law. Police arrest you, not your abusers. You have no rights, no protection. You're completely vulnerable, completely alone, in a world where no one cares if you live or die. And if you're a respectable woman, you still can't trust anyone. You can't trust potential husbands. Men lie about who they are, about their finances, about their intentions. You might marry someone only to discover he's violent, bankrupt, or already married somewhere else. You can't verify anything. You can't trust references because references can be faked. You can't trust appearances because everyone is performing a character. And once you're married, you're legally his property. If he's abusive, you have no recourse. If he abandons you, you have nothing. Trust is a luxury women can't afford in early California, and the absence of trust makes them incredibly vulnerable. Now let's talk about children. Children in early California are vulnerable in ways that are heartbreaking. They can't trust adults to protect them. Child labor is rampant. Children work dangerous jobs. They're exploited, abused, treated as cheap labor rather than human beings deserving protection. Orphans are especially vulnerable. They can't trust anyone to care for them. They're prey for predators. They're exploited by adults who claim to be helping them but are actually using them. There's no social services, no orphanages worth the name, no system to protect vulnerable children. They have to be suspicious of everyone, trust no one, because trusting the wrong adult could mean exploitation, abuse, or death, and this destroys childhood. Children should be able to trust adults, to feel safe, to be protected. In early California, they can't. They grow up hard, suspicious, traumatized. Now let's talk about immigrants, particularly Chinese immigrants. If you're Chinese in early California, the absence of trust is compounded by systematic racism. You can't trust white Americans. They rob you, assault you, murder you, and face no consequences. You can't trust the law. You're legally prohibited from testifying against white people in court. This means white people can commit crimes against you with complete impunity. You can't trust contracts. Even if you have a written agreement, it won't be enforced. You'll be cheated and have no recourse. You can't even trust other Chinese immigrants fully. Some are informants. Some collaborate with white oppressors for personal gain. The community is fractured by suspicion born from desperation. And if you're Mexican, Native American, or Black, you face similar or worse discrimination. You can't trust any of the systems or institutions. You're excluded, exploited, terrorized. The absence of trust falls most heavily on the most vulnerable. White men at least have the possibility of forming some limited trust relationships. Women, children, and minorities don't even have that. They're alone in the most complete sense, vulnerable, unprotected, at the mercy of people who feel no obligation to treat them with basic humanity. This is what the absence of trust looks like at its worst. If you want to see what a society without trust looks like at its absolute worst, look at the ethnic cleansing campaigns of the 1850s and 1860s. Without trust, there's no social fabric holding people together, no shared humanity, no recognition that we owe each other basic decency. And when times get hard, when the economy crashes, when competition intensifies, when fear escalates, the absence of trust turns into genocidal violence. Chinese immigrants become scapegoats. They're blamed for economic problems, for crime, for taking jobs. And because there's no trust, no relationship, no shared community, no recognition of common humanity, white miners and workers organize to drive them out through terror. Chinese mining camps are attacked, burned. Chinese miners are beaten, murdered, and driven into the wilderness. Their possessions are stolen. Their claims are taken. This isn't random violence. This is organized ethnic cleansing. Hundreds of Chinese people are killed. Thousands are driven from their homes and communities. And it happens because trust doesn't exist. Because you can't genocide people you trust. You can't commit atrocities against people you see as part of your community. But when there's no trust, no community, no shared values, when people are just others, just competitors, just threats, violence becomes easy. Native Americans face even worse. The California genocide kills tens of thousands of Native people. Militias organize hunting parties. They massacre entire villages. They kidnap children. They systematically destroy Native communities. And most white Californians don't intervene, don't object, don't feel troubled by it. Why would they? There's no trust between communities, no recognition of shared humanity. Native Americans are just others, threats, obstacles to be removed. The absence of trust makes genocide possible, makes it normal, makes it something people can participate in and then go home and sleep fine. Because without trust, there's no moral community, no sense of obligation to others, no shared values that say certain things are unacceptable. There's just us and them. And them can be destroyed without remorse. This is the darkest manifestation of a society without trust. This is where it leads when taken to its logical conclusion. Not just isolation, not just economic inefficiency, not just crime and violence, but systematic dehumanization, ethnic cleansing, genocide. And it happens in early California because the foundations of trust never existed. Because tens of thousands of people came together with no shared values, no community bonds, no mechanisms for building trust. And when trust doesn't exist, when every group sees every other group as competitors or threats, when there's no authority or institution anyone trusts to mediate, violence becomes inevitable. And not just individual violence, but organized, systematic violence against entire groups. This is what early California built. A society so devoid of trust that genocide became possible. This is the ultimate price of a trustless society. Now think about your life today. You trust people constantly. You probably don't even realize how much you trust. You trust that your bank won't steal your money. You trust that merchants won't poison you. You trust that your employer will pay you for your work. You trust that your doctor has actual medical training. You trust that if someone commits a crime against you, the police will investigate, that courts will provide some form of justice, that laws will be enforced. You trust that contracts will be honored, that there are consequences for fraud, that institutions function reasonably well most of the time. And most fundamentally, you trust that the people around you, your neighbors, co-workers, fellow citizens, share certain basic values, that they see you as human, that they won't murder you for your possessions. You trust because you live in a society with functioning institutions, with law enforcement, with accountability, with social bonds and community ties. This trust isn't naive. It's based on reality. The systems aren't perfect, but they exist, and they create consequences for betrayal. In early California, none of that existed. No institutions you could rely on. No law enforcement you could trust. No accountability for betrayal. No community bonds. Just strangers competing for scarce resources in an environment where betrayal was rational and trust was suicidal. You like to think you would have been different, that you would have trusted people, built community, been decent, but you wouldn't have. You would have been just as suspicious, just as isolated, just as unwilling to trust as everyone else. Because trust isn't a personality trait. It's a rational response to your environment. In an environment with functioning institutions and accountability, trust makes sense. In early California, trust would have gotten you killed. The difference between you and them isn't moral character. It's the society you live in. You're fortunate to live in a world where trust is possible, where institutions work well enough to make trust rational, where betrayal has consequences and cooperation has rewards. They weren't, and that made all the difference. Trust didn't exist in early California, not because people were inherently bad or uniquely immoral, but because the conditions that make trust possible didn't exist. No stable institutions, no accountability for betrayal, no community bonds, no repeated interactions, no shared values, no functioning law, just desperate strangers competing for survival in a chaotic, violent, lawless environment. And without trust, society collapses. people become isolated. Communities can't form, cooperation becomes impossible, violence becomes normal, the vulnerable become prey, and atrocities become acceptable. Early California shows us what happens when trust disappears, when social bonds dissolve, when institutions fail, when everyone is out for themselves. It shows us that trust isn't optional for human society, it's foundational. Without it, we descend into chaos, violence, and ultimately horror. We're fortunate to live in a world where trust is possible, where institutions function, where betrayal has consequences, where community bonds exist. It's not perfect. Trust is violated. Institutions fail. People are betrayed. But it's infinitely better than the alternative. Early California is the alternative, and it's a nightmare. So appreciate the trust you have, the institutions that make it possible, the social bonds that sustain it. Because without them, we're all just strangers in the wilderness, sleeping with one eye open, trusting no one. That's not a way to live. It's barely survival. And we should never take for granted the society that makes trust possible. If you found this eye-opening, check out our other documentaries about early American states, because understanding where we came from helps us protect what we have now. Don't let trust disappear. It's more precious than gold.